All right, let's go ahead and get started. Hello again. My name is Michelle Michaels. I lead the marketing department here at Versium. Welcome to How to Improve Marketing with First-Party Data Enhancement. Today, I will be joined by Chris Maddie, Versium's co-founder and CRO, and Sean Browning, VP of Partnerships at Lytics. We also have Tom Larson on the line with us here. He's our Senior Partnerships Manager for Versium, and he's going to be supporting with some Q&A at the end. We want today to be as valuable as possible, so we hope you to find this to be very educational and also walk away with some tactical next steps for using data enhancement within your marketing programs. Please feel free to ask questions throughout the webinar as they come up right in the Q&A section. The presentation itself will be somewhere around 40 minutes, so we'll have plenty of time at the end to answer any questions. If we don't happen to get to your question, we'll just be following up with emails after. So with no further ado, I will hand it over to Sean. Good morning, Sean.
Good morning, Michelle. Thank you very much. Thank you all for sharing your time with us this morning. Appreciate your attendance. I'm Sean Browning, Head of Partnerships here at Lytics. I work with Versium almost on a day-to-day basis on a very exciting partnership having to do with data. I keep wanting to say enablement, but excuse me there. Anyway, so I'm Sean Browning with Lytics, and I've been in the web analytics, BI, tag management, and customer data platform space for quite some time. But the things like getting in front of our partners and agencies and customers and teaching them more about how to be creative with CDPs, that's totally what I love to do. And when I have an opportunity with, say, Versium to do more of the data facilitation, then these kind of webinars really are exciting for me. So anyway, I want to pass it to Chris Maddie. Good morning, Chris. You're on mute, sir.
Unmute myself. You think after 2 years of being virtual, we'd know how to do that. Pleasure to be here this morning and talk about a partnership that we're very excited about with Lytics. My background, I've been in the data and technology industry my whole career, and really around identity resolution, going back to when I was a younger guy at InfoSpace, where we were one of the early pioneers of people search services and ultimately brought the white and yellow pages online. And over the past 2 decades, I've been involved in various data technology startups, really centered around people data, identity resolution. And we're really excited to talk about how we're bringing some of these capabilities that Versium does into the Lytics platform. A little bit about Versium. We started this company 10 years ago with the vision that we wanted to use our expertise in data and data technology to help marketers really do their job much more effectively. We operate a very robust, industry-leading identity resolution platform that really helps marketers better identify, understand who their customers are in richer detail, and ultimately reach them much more effectively out in the digital world. And that is all done through identity data, identity technology. Our identity platform sits on top of a very significant volume of data. It is both 2 types of data: identity data, which is data that allows you to identify and reach a customer. And these are things like emails, phone numbers, addresses, mobile IDs, things of that nature. There's 2 billion of these contact points that we have access to. And then insights data, which is all the data that helps you understand who these customers are. And these are characteristics about them, demographic characteristics about a consumer or household, financial characteristics, firmographics about the business that a person works for. And this allows for segmenting and custom audience creation, all these types of things, all with the goal of helping marketers really improve their marketing ROI. And these are the types of capabilities that we are building into the Lytics platform, and we're going to get into in a lot more detail over the next 30 minutes or so. But Sean, I'll pass it back to you to talk a little bit about the Lytics platform that we're so excited about here at Versium.
Thank you, Chris. Yeah, about Lytics. Lytics is a technology organization as a customer data platform. And we are combining the right data at the right time to enhance digital experiences to deliver highly effective one-to-one marketing campaigns. The digital CDP space has become quite hot in the last 3 years, as you probably know. As Lytics has behavioral data, we take that data-driven approach. But when we combine our Lytics behavioral data with the Versium Reach data enrichment components that Chris just talked about, that really enhances that first-party data strategy that customers should have now to really drive greater enhancements and increase in customer engagement, and also deliver really high numbers as far as marketing ROI goals. When we talk about customer engagement, that gets into hundreds of percents. When we get into marketing ROI goals, that gets into sometimes thousands of percents. But I took the numbers out because sometimes they're really hard to believe. But because of Lytics behavioral plus Versium's other data enrichment component, that really makes the big difference. And that's why I'm excited about this webinar today.
Great. So just to touch on the agenda, what we're being covering here in the next 35 minutes or so, we're going to talk a little bit initially about the Lytics Versium partnership, since that's a big piece of why we're here. But then we want to get into the history of identity technology. What is it and why it's so important within digital advertising? And then touch on what's gone on in the last 3 or 4 years based upon a number of factors, the shift back to first-party data and why that's occurring. And then we'll get into some challenges that marketers have within this environment to do their job most effectively. And then we'll show you some things we're doing within the integration. So we'll wrap up and show you how you gain access to the types of things we're going to be talking about here within Lytics. And again, I would invite, bring on questions anytime, and we'll be tracking those and we'll cover those at the end of the session. So speaking about the Lytics partnership, oops, sorry about that. Let me get my picture out of the way. We have built in a suite of 7 integrated data enrichment tools so that Lytics customers can gain access to this rich volume of both identity and insights data. These capabilities support both B2B and B2C marketers, which makes it very unique in the industry. We don't just work with consumer identity data, we also work with business identity data, and we link those two together, which is very, very powerful, as you'll see here as we go further in the presentation. This identity data is extensive, so as we are able to add that into the first-party data, we can extend the reach and help customers really more effectively market to their prospects and customers in terms of the data that's within the Lytics platform. And in addition to identity data, it's the insights data, which allows a lot of custom segmentation and these types of things. So you can build custom audiences, you can do custom website creatives, things of that nature, based on really understanding who these people are that are touching your various marketing touch points. From the standpoint of the 7 capabilities we have built into the Lytics platform, these are all done through seamless APIs, so you can flow data from within the Lytics platform into our environment for data enrichment and add a lot more data that you can utilize to improve marketing. And I'll just go through what these 7 are real quickly. Consumer contact append, which is the ability to enrich the first-party data with additional contact points, emails, phone numbers, addresses. The use case here, for example, is, we've got people who come to us and say, we've got 50 million members, across 30 million households, but we only got 8 million emails. We want to get more additional emails because we want to communicate to our customer base. So we can add additional contact points for direct communication. Consumer demographic append, where we can take a list of data within people data within the Lytics environment, and we can add demographic details, upwards of 20, 30, 40 different characteristics, everything from age, income levels, gender, things of this nature. So you might want to market to people that have different characteristics differently. You might want to segment and understand your audience in a much richer way. Once you've understood them and you've segmented them, you want to activate these audiences. You want to create digital campaigns within Facebook, within broader programmatic, within Google, LinkedIn. We can take all of the additional contact points that those platforms can utilize to put ads in front of that specific population of people. And we do that by adding all sorts of additional contact points that these platforms look for to be able to say, oh, we want to put an ad in front of this person, this person, and this person. So the more contact points you have in that regard, the better you're going to be able to reach these people. Same thing for business. And it's really powerful for the business audience. We're going to touch on that in detail later, because the entire ad tech ecosystem was designed to market to consumers and not businesses. And so if you can associate consumer contact points to a business list, you completely change the game for B2B digital advertising. And it's in that sense, instead of demographics, or in addition to demographics, firmographic details. You might want to market to companies with larger employee base differently than smaller. So we have a bunch of firmographic data we can add to enrich data as well. And demographic applies here as well, because B2B marketers, again, might want to market differently based upon a demographic profile, say someone who's over 40 versus someone who's under. We have a IP to business domain solution, which takes website traffic that hasn't filled out a form yet, and we determine what businesses are associated with that traffic, what companies are looking at your website, so you can refocus your marketing effort in that direction. And then consumer to business, which oftentimes a business person puts in their personal email when they register on a lead form. We can help identify their business profile or their business persona. These are all the capabilities we've built into the Lytics platform and why we're so excited about this partnership. Let's shift over to the digital marketing ecosystem. It's really exploded over the past decade. It's going to grow from 2018 to 2023, double up to 84 billion. Very large industry, lots of money being spent. Both B2B and B2C is growing at very high rates. And what underpins all of this is data. 78% of marketers say that their customer engagement is data driven. So data is what's helped fuel all this growth, because it's what data is what allows the targeting, it's what allows the conversion rates and improved marketing efficiency. The problem is that data is a challenge. It's difficult. There's all sorts of problems with data. Only 33% of marketers say that they are satisfied with their ability to effectively optimize their consumer experience with data. Really, how satisfied are they with the data? And that's what we focus on. We help solve a lot of these problems with our technology. A list of some of the problems people are encountering, and I'm sure, Sean, you've seen some of these. As I know you guys solve some
this every day, right? Yep, exactly.
Data hygiene, quality, right? It's 30 to 40% of CRM data is just not usable. There's errors in entry, there's bad formatting, what we consider, there's all sorts of cleanse issues, if you will, that makes it useful. Completeness. I mentioned earlier the example of the retailer that just didn't have that many emails, let alone phone numbers, would want to do an SMS marketing to their customer base. So it's very sparse. Accessibility, the data resides in many different form structures, and how do you get to it? Can you consolidate data silos? And that's a big part. I mean, Sean, CDPs, that's a big value point, is how do you take all the data that enterprise is dealing with and put it in one location so you can now most effectively use it, correct?
Absolutely.
Yeah. And then you get into things like evolving privacy, timeliness. Is it accurate data? Integration. Can you activate directly into Facebook, Google, and LinkedIn, or do you got to manually do the process? Are you integrated in with HubSpot? Can you have data flow from the different platforms and solutions and products flow effectively? And then at the very bottom, ironically, because that's what we're talking about here, is identity reconciliation. As you have data in different silos, in one environment, it might be Bob Smith, and the other it's Robert Smith, and yet another it might be R. Smith. Well, how do you know if that's the same person? How do you understand their engagement with you, their different touch points? And that's one example of identity resolution, but you could take address and phone and all these different things. How do you really get a good view of all the different ways someone may interact with your brand? And in the mobile world, you got mobile IDs as well. So being able to tie all this together to really understand what is your customer doing as they interact with you is crucial to be able to do your marketing most effectively. And these are all the problems that really affect the industry.
Hey, Chris, I agree completely. And don't switch back to that slide, but you did show the growth from 2020 to 21. I think it's only going to be a bigger problem. And that's why I love this synergy that we have, because it is something that you fill in those gaps where technologies might not have that as a solution. So that makes perfect sense.
Yeah, we like to say at Versium's office, you guys focus on the marketing, we'll focus on the data. And we work on the data to help solve the problem. Our customers understand their customers. We just give them the different data capabilities to help them do their job better. Switching to identity, which is really a big part of what's fueling a lot of the growth. I thought I'd give a little bit of background on why is identity so crucial, and a little bit of history on this. If you go back in time, literally a couple decades ago, cookies were invented to speed up the website, how fast a website loads, because it would track history of where you've been, and it's in your cache. Well, it turns out that allowed marketers to say, hey, if we know which websites you visited, if you visited Ford, you must be looking for a car. And so this became a really powerful vehicle for advertising targeting, just by looking at the browsing history. As the internet evolved and gated content became prevalent, and registered sites that you'd register, what ended up happening is the identity data that's captured during registration, i.e. C. Maddie at Yahoo, that is then associated to the cookie. So now the cookie doesn't just have the visibility of what you've visited, the browser's history, it knows who visited. Now this introduces all kinds of things that we're facing with now in terms of privacy and this type of thing, but it's really powerful when you start taking identity data, mapping it to web traffic activity, and then more importantly, being able to take that identity data and map it to offline characteristics. Things like demographics, your age, gender, income level, things like assets owned, what type of cars do you drive, right? So when you go to Jiffy Lube and you get your oil change and they know what car you've driven, now there's a data associated with your name of what car you drive. And now people can start creating segments of people who drive certain cars. And now advertisers, Ford and GM and all the different folks can say, I want to target people with certain offline characteristics. And that is all done by taking the identity data and mapping it off to offline data characteristics. And ultimately, this has just caused the internet advertising industry to explode. Because now you can effectively reach people that have the characteristics you want. You can put ads in front of them that are relevant to what their interests are. And in fact, people then get ads that are more relevant to their interests. So there's some really powerful things. And it's really what caused the internet advertising industry to explode. It also created a wealth, or not a wealth, but a whole bunch of new companies and new data technologies and new ways to create custom segments and these types of things. And as all the internet was exploding with all this capability, well, some bad things happened, right? Synthetic identities, robots, privacy concerns. It's estimated that somewhere around 30% of internet traffic is not human beings browsing, but computers that are either crawling or indexing or maybe doing some nefarious activity, robots. In 2017, Procter & Gamble cut 200 million ad spending because they determined that their ads were not reaching the right people, or for that matter, even real people. So identity starts to solve this problem, by the way. So over the last 3 or 4 years, there's been a big shift away from these lack of transparent black box ad tech platforms, combining it with things like Google's removal of the third-party cookie. There's been a big shift of emphasis back to first-party data. And first-party data is the data that brands gather when they interact directly with their customer base, through their website, through these types of things. The type of data, Sean, that you're loading in for your customers into your CDP.
It's true. It's true. And there's also a thing about, we talk about Google's removal of the third-party cookie. Same thing followed with Apple. And same thing followed with Firefox, the whole privacy concern of making sure that the third-party cookie, the cross-site scripting capabilities have all gone away, trying to make a safer internet. So what we're talking about today, audience I'm sure knows, not only just the first-party data, but you've got to own your data and you have to move away from the third-party data. And you've got to make sure that this is not a probabilistic method, but it's a deterministic method. So all of the data, all the attributes, all the enrichment that we're talking about, combining Versium, combining Lytics, this is all deterministic data. So if we know who Chris is at Yahoo, then we know exactly who that is. And it's not, we kind of think or probably think this is all deterministic first-party data, definitely in line with the strategy for anybody on the line who's going to have a good strategy going forward from 2022 and onward.
I'm glad you said the word deterministic data. Everything we do with our identity engine is all based on deterministic, accurate data, not predicting we think it's the right person. It all stems off of actual data about the person. So as there's this emphasis being put back on first-party data, where marketers can own their own data, activate their own data, instead of going and buying an audience in some platform where you really don't know who those people are, you know who they are because you have the data about them within your environment. There's been, as going back to the problems we talked about, you've got to fix that first-party data, make it more valuable. So identity resolution technology does a lot of that. You need to cleanse your data. You got to normalize it, validate that this is actually really a person. It's the most recent data. And then data enrichment. How do you take, instead of enriching a cookie with demographics to be able to create this audience, that's highly targeted, what we're doing is we're enriching the first party data with this type of demographics and these types of insights data. So instead of cookie enrichment, it's first party data enrichment. So the benefits of identity powered data enrichment are very significant because that first party data is often messy. It's lacking, it doesn't have all of the attributes. You might have a name and an address, but you don't have an email or a phone number. And so identity-powered data enrichment can add additional contact points and improve the quality and extend that first-party data for better communication and outreach. Demographics and firmographic insights data helps understand who these people are much more effectively. So you can segment, you can market to different subpopulations within your first-party data. When you go to activate these audiences, the more contact points you have, all of the ad tech ecosystems, Facebook, Google, LinkedIn, broader programmatic, they use identity data to target still. They still map to cookies, but instead of you just going in and buying a population, they allow you to upload a list to target specific individuals. You can upload a list of consumers, you can upload a list of business people, and now ads will appear within those platforms just in front of those people. That's really when we talk about activation, is how do you make sure that you can put ads in front of the highest percentage of those folks. If you've got 100,000 people you want to reach, you don't want to put ads in front of 15,000, you want to put it in front of all 100,000. And having all this data under your control provides full transparency, and ultimately you can actually do a lot more with attribution tracking. So when you do your media spend, you see the traffic of your website, you can reconcile behind the scenes and say, wow, I'm really seeing my marketing dollars work. Let's shift over to a big problem. We've talked a lot about identity. We've talked a lot about insights, a little bit of history on how these things have powered the ad tech ecosystem. That has been primarily around consumer marketing. So while these platforms will allow marketers to upload a list of people to target, the problem is all of that mapping doesn't work very well for business contacts. And this applies, by the way, for all the consumer marketers here. We're going to talk a little bit about B2B for a couple slides, but it is highly relevant here as well. We've got companies come to us and say, we want to target business decision makers for our consumer product. Indian Motorcycles wanted to market to VPs in tech because there's a high propensity. Well, if you've got a list of VPs in the tech industry, let's say you got a list of 400,000 of them, can you effectively put digital ads in front of those people across Facebook, Google, and LinkedIn? And what I'm going to show you now is traditionally you have not been able to, but identity technology really unlocks this. So the B2B marketer traditionally, because they have not been able to use the broader digital ecosystem very effectively, have had to rely on smiling and dialing. Buy a list of people and call. And I get calls all the time still, but that's even less prevalent now because of COVID, which we'll get to in a moment. Or they buy a list of emails, and then I'm sure everybody on this call gets, if not tens, hundreds of emails of people with all sorts of tricks trying to get you to engage. So phone and email, direct outreach through BDR reps. How do you accelerate these activities by awareness building campaigns in the digital ecosystem? And that's what needs to happen. Combine this with what's occurred over the last couple of years, and I don't know about probably half the people on this call are working from home right now. I'm giving the presentation from my dining room. And so as people are working from home, it's even more difficult to reach the business folks because you can't pick up a phone. You call them at their office line, they won't pick up. People have invented things like geofencing around corporate headquarters. Okay, now let's put ads around that population. IP mapping. Well, none of this works if a person's working from home. So really the lines are blurring from, people marketing. It's a person you're marketing. It might be a business persona, consumer, and these lines are all blurring. How do you put ads in front of all these people? And as you see from this slide, 60+% of workers are going to be, this is going to stick around for a while. People are going to be working from home, which is great. It's going to save on fuel costs. There's a lot of benefits from it, but how do you effectively reach these people? It's more crucial than ever in a business marketing sense of how you can put ads in front of all of the touch points that a person engages with. How do you market your marketing automation system on Facebook, on Google, on LinkedIn, or broader digital to build awareness of your brand so that when the BDR reps do call or email, they get responses? And what we see is when you do digital ads in concert with those activities, it dramatically accelerates engagement. I think we've got a case study, we have a case study where the cost per demo went from $550 down to $330 when they effectively put awareness campaigns out in the digital ecosystem in concert with their BDR outbound calling. Here's the problem. Because if you recall back on that identity slide, it was CMADI at Yahoo in registration. Most of the identity targeting in the broader ad tech ecosystem is mapped to personal contact details, not business. Even LinkedIn, which is a B2B networking capability, social media site, 75% of the profiles are mapped to a person's personal email, i.e. cmatty at Yahoo, not cmatty at Versium. So if you've got that list of 100,000 marketing decision makers that you want to put digital ads in front of, if you upload those into Facebook, Google, or onboard through a LiveRamp, Facebook, you're only going to match 11%. They're only going to find 11% of those people. They all allow you to upload direct lists to target, but if that is a business list, it just simply doesn't work very well. But there is good news. And that is the B2B to C identity graphing capability, which is a part of what we do, a big part when we talk about just the B2B side of things. What we're able to do is take that same list of 100,000, or in this example, 1,000 business people, 1,000 records, and we add upwards of 5,000 to 7,000 additional contact points for those same people, additional emails, phone numbers, and addresses. We encrypt all that, so there's no, so we're all fully privacy compliant. And now all of these platforms will take that data as a target list to put digital ads in front of. And now you reach a much higher rate. And before we do that, we also can do some insights so that you can segment the rest. The end result, it's a game changer. And it's not incremental change, it is revolutionary change. And these are actual numbers. Sean, I know we were talking earlier, like, are those real?
Yeah.
And no, if you take a list and upload to Facebook of business people, you're going to be able to put ads in front of about 11% of those people. After B2B to C enrichment, you can get to 82, 90%. In fact, I've seen as high as 100% on Google before. And this is a game changer because now you can truly spend your media budget in the digital ecosystem across both social and broader programmatic and put digital ads in front of the people you know are receiving those ads and those business people.
Hey, Chris, on this one, when I speak to Lytics customers, they're telling me that their spend is increasing inside of Facebook. However, the response rate is decreasing, right? So they tell me that they're hoping that Lytics is going to solve this challenge so that they can reduce their spend inside of Facebook, but increase their activity because they continually see this decrease. This slide right here, these results of having to do with the additional contact points by tying in the behavioral data along with the attribute data, combining all of that to see these results. This is the slide I like to show the most because this is the most compelling picture of the before and the after. And since this is the real results for real customers, this combined with 2 slides ago are the 2 things I like to speak about the most because they're the ones that really grab the attention. And when you have additional contact points, when you're targeting somebody in LinkedIn, but using their personal email address for their business messaging, those 2 things right there are definitely worth the cost of entry.
Yeah, and it works the same for consumer. It's all about how you optimize your identity graph for optimum outreach and use that same technology to associate insights, data. And Facebook is a primarily consumer-oriented site. If they do lookalike modeling, they're not doing it on title and tech stack and things of that nature on the business. They're doing it on human characteristics. And so it's just not effective for B2B marketing. But if you do that on your side and then activate the audience, that's what's driving this huge ROI. And to your point, Sean, what we showed on the last slide was just match rate, which means if I've got 100,000 people I want to put ads in front of, just those people, how many of those people does Facebook, Google, and LinkedIn find or associate so they can put ads just in front of those people? And it's very small. But what does that translate in terms of marketing dollars? So here's a test we recently did here within the last just couple months. You'll notice match rate, I've got the 3 arrows of the key points. But on the right column is the non-enriched data, and you're uploading it into the Google platform. And then the middle column, the left column, that is after enrichment. And you'll see the results I'm speaking to. First, you see a 3x increase in match rate, which means instead of reaching 35% of those people in that audience and putting ads in front of them, you're able to reach 91 to 100%. And it's not just match rate, because that just means they see those people in their platform. But those people have to be engaging within the different environments, within the YouTube channels and all the different, Gmail and all the different places ads can appear. And that's where you really see it work. So in this case, there was a $150 a day budget just to test this. You'll notice after data enrichment, for the same effective cost or budget in terms of per click, we drove literally 5 times greater impressions. So where you've got a media budget you can't even spend because you only want to spend it on your ideal customer, if you can't put the ads, you don't get the spend, you don't get the traffic. And so that translates by higher match rate, turns into greater impressions. And look at the clicks, 10 times the number of clicks. And that's really the goal of digital advertising, is how do I put my brand out there, get them to come to my website, engage so that I can put them into the funnel, and ultimately, it's match rate, impressions, clicks to dollars. And Sean, once we create these audiences that are greatly enriched, what are they doing? They're going into the website, they're engaging, and that flows right back into your CDP for all the great things you guys do.
Exactly. Yesterday we were talking about, you put a dollar in the machine and get 3 out, or you put a dollar in the machine and you get 5 out. Why not? Why not do this? This is, the proof points are here. I love that you put this this case study here.
And these are all true and real numbers. It really, when we talk about being a game changer for B2B marketers, it really is. It's the same for consumer. It all is the same value, but it's really huge for the B2B guys. So we've talked a bit about identity. We talked a bit about power of data in the ad tech industry, the evolution, the shift back towards first-party data, why identity technology and solutions is so powerful, ability to enrich first-party data. All of these things we've been talking about is what we're building in through our partnership with Lytics, so that Lytics customers can get these benefits. Versium Reach is a product that we have. What we're talking about is taking the APIs that power these solutions and integrating them directly into Lytics, which we're going to show you here. With that, I think we've covered a lot of what Versium does. Sean, I'm going to turn it back over to you. I think we got a good 10, 12, 15 minutes here before we open up for questions. Yeah. It's been really great just talking about some of the things we're doing, and I'll let you take it from here and talk about Lytics from your side and how we're plugging in there.
Absolutely. And that's in this partnership, that's what's so intriguing and compelling about this is, since we are both putting the person at the center of the universe as far as the data are concerned, that's Lytics foundation, right? It's not web analytics cookie analysis, right? That's gone the way of the dodo. We are talking about person-based, person-centric analysis, where as Lytics has built out since 2012, this graph database, and used a person at the center of the graph. Then as we add additional details to it, email, chat, purchases, social media detail, and the like, we've really enhanced the understanding of who that individual is through the identity resolution, but also the behaviors, right? What are people clicking on? What are they looking at on a website or a mobile device? So we can grab the detail and then add that together. Because if Lytics is that control tower as a customer data platform, then we can get those appropriate messages out by email and chat and mobile and web, like you would see there on those items on the right. But when you add the additional enrichment, the additional attributes from Versium, that really supercharges the conversation to make it very pinpointed accurate. And it also reduces the cost while increasing the accuracy.
Great. Yeah, I love it. And let's take a look at how this really looks. I love this slide where
so we walk through,
really show how it all works.
So, you talk about use cases. This is the one we usually solve first, which is the anonymous to known challenge. And so if someone comes to the website, they're anonymous, first click of a first visit, but Lytics JavaScript tag is dropping a first-party cookie on the site. Once we drop that first-party cookie, then we're listening for all of the behavior and all of the activity that that people are clicking on. And so we listen for the products or the categories of interest. And we're building up this history so that as we're serving more content or something that's more relevant on the site and learning more, we're able to combine that online data with offline data, pull that in together, and then say, hey, we don't know who you are, but if you would sign in, or if you would give us your mobile number or your email address, if you give us something, then we'll give you something in return. What happens is when someone does provide their email address or phone number, they do sign in. Now we know who that cookie is, and we associate Jason Eric in this case with the cookie and the behavior and the identity to build out a profile. Then once we have that profile, now we can target people and say, hey, they need this message through social media, email, web content, and the like. But then what we really do is we enhance the detail and the offers with Versium data, right? All of the enrichments, all the attributes, all of the details that are brought to the table because of Versium, you qualify for this. This is something special for you. But as we have the behavioral data, if someone's looking at cars, then we could serve those car ads. But if we enrich the data with additional attributes, then the Versium icon comes up here on the next click. And now we have the additional details coming in to really understand more about that person's interest and the more detail about them. So if you click the next thing, the icon comes
You know,
up.
just one comment on this is, you know, it's interesting as you look at, we're talking about first party data, first party cookies versus this third party. So the transparency, we know exactly, or your customer know exactly that they're real people, it's real engagement versus relying on some platform out in the ether, if you will. So it's really the game-changing solution.
It's true. So the enrichment really lends itself to predicting the likelihood and the propensities for future activity. But the results are that you get better targeting, you get increased reach, right? When you're combining these two technologies, which makes such a compelling story, then you get to own your own data. And that was one of the differentiators that really attracted me to this partnership was there are other organizations that are data suppliers as well. There are others that do data enrichment. However, they're not like Versium in that they don't have as many contact points and they don't have as many attributes, nor are you getting a copy or seeing what the data are. So you can see the data with reach, whereas the others are much more of a black box, like Chris alluded to. But you really do see the results in the improved marketing, your return on your investment. You do see that, you know, if your Facebook rates are dropping, you see the turnaround and they start increasing, but you see the costs go down while the interaction's going up.
So I know we've been me mostly talking for the last 35 minutes, 40 minutes or so. I want to make sure we leave some time for questions.
Cool.
Let's why don't we, Sean, let's show the folks here a little bit about what this looks like. We'll go through this fairly quickly and then open it up for some questions.
Absolutely. Now, a lot of this has to do with PII. So we're keeping this with my profile because it's safe. If anybody wants to see kind of a deeper dive, please reach out to me, reach out to Chris. That way we'll give you something that's a little more closed instead of on a public webinar, because a lot of this is PII data. But if we look at my profile inside of Lytics, then you get to see several things. Notice in the middle is the behavior. How frequently have I been to the website? How recently have I been to the website? How intensely have I been to the website? Or what's my momentum? Lytics will calculate that. We'll also understand the content or product affinity on the right side. What are the things that that individual on an individual level are looking at? So we give you, Lytics gives you the behavioral data about individuals. We'll even tell you what time of day, right? Notice that Mondays and Thursdays seem to be the more prominent days. There's a lot of activity on Monday at 6 o'clock or Monday and Thursday at 10 a.m. So we know when to send the right message to the right person. But then as we have additional detail, you know, that only gives you the behavioral data. When I look at the details about this person's profile, it's not as long as I'm expecting. I'm expecting this to roll off the edge of the page. But when I add the Versium demographic enrichment, if I click on details for this profile, I would expect to see a much larger record. And that's what this is going to show is when we add the Versium detail, this is from the Lytics user interface about a profile of an individual. When you know more details of a person, you can build much more accurate targeting audiences.
And while you're showing this as just one person, Sean,
Yep.
Imagine having a whole population, and now you're saying, hey, I want to pick a population of people who are married, and I want to have a different creative for married folks versus non-married folks. And so as an individual insight, it's very powerful, but then as you start aggregating, you're creating segments.
It's true. And so I wanted to use this to show what are some of those contact points, what are some of those touch points. If Versium's demographic detail is telling you about the person and their age category and other things about the demographics, that's part of it. The firmographic also give you the details about where does someone live and what, you know, how long have they been at that location, or what is their business phone number. So there's both the B2C and the B2B components that add the enrichment to the record so that the Lytics behavioral data and the detail from Versium really make a compelling record of an individual person. So when you build an audience, we're going to walk through building an audience here, you give it a name, and I'm saying, okay, I want to know who are those people that have been enriched through the Versium attributes and detail. Then we know, setting up an audience, who are those people where I have a known email address.
And certain common characteristics, right? And so now,
Yep.
Now the question is, how do you activate those? And that's where the identity data really becomes powerful.
Right. And so I build an audience of people who I have an email address for. That gets me to 96,469 people. If I have that 96,000 people where I know that they have their email address, I click on export and then activate the Versium enrichment. And so I'll type in Versium, it brings up the Versium tile. I'll click on this tile, and this tile will then say, let's tie together the Versium detail to that email address. And I know I've got 96,000 people. And what this will do is this is going to show you Facebook, LinkedIn, and Google, where you could see Facebook emails all hashed, right? This is all SHA-256. but these are additional contact points. This is very important. And Chris, he touched on this earlier, but Chris, you got more detail about the contact points to
Yeah,
really.
this is where we get into the guts of what we're doing. So you're
Mhm.
looking at one particular individual, but we've added all of these contact points on the right. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 additional contact points, or so, 6, 7. These are additional contact points for the same person. And that gives it a much higher probability that you're going to find them on Facebook, because I use CD Maddie on Apple, but I don't use it at Facebook. At Facebook, I use Chris Maddie at Gmail. So if you happen to have C Maddie at Yahoo and not Chris Maddie at Gmail, you're not going to find me on Facebook. But if we have the ability to add as many additional contact points for the same person, this is what's driving that increase from we go from 11% to 85%. And it's all encrypted. We're not passing any data around. I mean, any PII data around. All these platforms accept hashed information or encrypted data. Same thing for Google. You'll notice here there's even more added. And the reason is Google handles up to 8 additional emails. Facebook handles up to 3. Each platform is different. And so what we do is we optimize the data enrichment for maximum reach and optimize it for the format requirements of each system. Google is different than LinkedIn, is different than Facebook. And if you want to map to cookies through LiveRamp, that's yet again another structure. And so we take care of all of that. We take care of all the data. At the end of the day, the marketer just wants to reach as many people as possible. And then of course, to the results, right? This is really the benefit we're talking about.
The results, then that's how you cast the wider net, right? You got Sean at personal email addresses, professional email addresses, previous employers. But when you can aggregate those all together, those are additional contact points. You're going to see that lift in each of the major technologies.
That's exactly right. Great. It's been a pleasure, Sean, doing this webinar with you. And we'll leave this slide up. I think, Michelle, I'm going to turn it to you for any questions that may have come in as we've been presenting, and we'll leave this slide up. Please feel free to jot this down. Contact me anytime directly by phone or email, or Sean, and then Phil is also on our team. But Michelle, I'll let you take it from here.
Great. Thank you, Sean. Thank you, Chris. That was wonderful. Had quite a few questions rolling in, so we're just going to get right into them. First question that came up a couple times, actually, both of you, either of you can answer this one. Is an email address required for enrichment?
I'll take that one.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so the way we designed this is so that we know that there is PII that's exchanged. We are hinging upon the email address as that identifier, that main key, so that if that's that email address, Versium has additional contact points for that email. Plus, we all have the behavioral data, so we do hinge upon the email address as that particular piece for these connections. Versium has capability of using additional variables besides the email address. And Chris, maybe you want to talk more about just beyond email address connectivity, but there are capabilities with Versium that are beyond what Lytics does. But Lytics is focused on the email address.
Yeah, email is really emerging as a real unique identity element in a lot of different platforms, as it's a very unique identifier for a person. We do accept on our platform all sorts of other identity inputs where we can do enrichment, but within the Lytics environment, it really keys off of email, which is really the way the industry is headed. So go ahead, Michelle.
Great. Okay, I know we get this one a lot here at Versium. This also came in a couple times. How often or how fresh is the Versium data? How often is it updated?
Yeah, so it's interesting. The same identity resolution technology, identity mapping that we use to associate our data to first-party data, we use that same technology to pull in data from many, many, many different sources. Some are data aggregators, some are, there's all sorts of different commercial avenues. We pull it all together. And literally tens of thousands of files. We've got nearly 900 million unique email addresses at our disposal. That's just one type of, talking about email, type of contact point. And we're bringing in data daily, weekly, monthly, quarterly. It's all coming in. And so our identity engine does that mapping at runtime and real time. So we pull the data from different sources. We don't just have one flat file. So what that means is anytime we're doing data enrichment, our customers, our partners are getting the most freshest, most recent, most powerful data. So we're bringing it in constantly in terms of refresh. Some things like demographics, they just don't change that often, right? So you don't have to bring that in except for maybe on a quarterly basis. But new emails, other activities, you want to bring in more frequently. So we're doing it in a constant real-time basis.
Great, thanks, Chris. Just had a great question come in. How would you recommend to use Lytics and Versium to improve account-based marketing outreach to new contacts?
That's a great question. Sean, you want me to dive on that one first and then you supplement?
That one, because you've got an opportunity right now where you've got a customer that's doing ABM. Go for it. Yeah.
So ABM, account-based marketing, which is how do you market to specific businesses? Mm-hmm. And there are ABM solutions out there. They've used IP, what IPs are at the business. They've used geofencing. You put a lat long around a corporate office. You're putting ads in front of just those people. The problem is two things. Doesn't work in COVID, and you can't filter by job function or title. You're going to put ads in front of every employee. You may only be needing to put it in front of the buying committee, which is the marketing decision maker, the marketing ops person, and the finance budget person, for example. So what we do is we have an ABM solution that allows people to construct an audience of specific businesses they want to target. It may be that they did an IP to business domain and say, I want to put ads in front of people who are engaging, but I don't know who they are. It may just be that they have a list of businesses. What we're able to do is then associate the people that work at those businesses at a relatively high rate and allow filtering by job function, job title. So now you're only putting ads in front of the most relevant people that you want to build awareness to, and not spending dollars on, the barista versus the manager, the baggage claim worker versus the marketing person at American Airlines. So it's very powerful to be able to get even that much more granular with the actual data. And that's the type of things we do when we're able to do the data enrichment.
We're even doing that here at Lytics. Same ABM method. You're building those audiences inside of the Lytics interface based on title, based on geography, based on the particular attributes that are enhanced and delivered because of Versium. We're leveraging those particular things to perform our ABM campaigns. So we're eating our own fillet, if you will.
And as soon as you start adding the insights data, and this is really important, now you can say, look, not only are we going to market to those people, what if we want to market to people at different ages differently with different creatives? That's where the data enrichment sitting on top of the ABM even gets more powerful. Oh, and by the way, when it comes to activating on Facebook and Google and LinkedIn, the best thing you could do is have all those additional contact points. So now you're going to reach those people at a much, much higher rate.
That's great. That leads in actually to another question we've had. Are there restrictions on advertising platforms that you can send the online audience data to?
I'll let you take that one, Sean, because when we enrich and then you guys activate.
Exactly. And for activation, I don't think there are limitations in many aspects. I mean, if you want to use more, we've talked about Google, we've talked about LinkedIn and Facebook, right? Those are just the big three. But the list is very, very long. Everything from ad roll and on down the list. There's tons of activations. The same principle applies. Who is the individual? What's their web behavior or digital behavior across devices? How is that enriched with all of the attributes from Versium? And then once you have that audience, you could send it to any number of activation platforms. There's no limit there. And the variety is just about limitless. So yeah, we've got the connectors for the outbound. No restrictions. It applies equally across all activation platforms.
And that speaks to one of the problems we highlighted early on is the integrations. Mm-hmm. Seamless integrations and frictionless flow of data adds to the efficiency.
Yeah, great question. Thanks, Michelle.
That's great. All right. Here's one pretty specific to Lytics. Does the job constantly run within Lytics, or am I able to manage how often it appends the data?
Oh, good question. Yeah, so as Chris was just touching on, some of the data that they use for their sources of data are enriched or updated on a daily, weekly, or monthly basis. Then no matter how frequently the data are updated, right, we have to collect and refresh the data. So it depends on what the customer's requirements are. So if we're focused on customer success and satisfaction, and they want the most accurate enrichment attributes, then they might want to update their data on a daily basis. But sometimes your home address or your phone number don't really change that often, right? So that's more of a monthly or a quarterly update that would be performed. So depending on the data would dictate how frequently those intervals would change. So as we say, we want the consumer data or the demographic or the firmographic data or what have you, and there's 7 different options. Different data get updated at different rates. If it changes on an hourly basis, we have that option. If it's a daily basis or a weekly or a quarterly basis, we have those options too. I would just put it back to the customer and go, what data are you looking for? How frequently does it change? Let's set the interval on that hourly or weekly or quarterly basis as appropriate.
Great, thanks, Sean. We've had a couple UI product questions. One specifically around how to export the data. Question here, how easily can I export the data that I have appended?
Let me take that one, Chris. So here's something that's magical that also attracted me to this relationship. You can get a copy of the data. You can export the data. You can see it. You can understand how accurate this is or how many touch points or accurate data points there are. And that's something that's really amazing because others keep it all closed and close to the vest. So with this, data in, data out, as we're pulling in data, web data, Versium data, and we're combining that, the data out component, you could send this to a CSV. You could email it to yourself. You can send it to other platforms through API or through direct connection. But to get a copy of the data or to export that, you can export that to a CSV, like I mentioned. You can get it to Amazon through an S3 bucket. You could get it to Microsoft. You can get it to any of the major clouds, especially Google, especially Snowflake. There are ways of taking this combined information and get it out to where you tend to interact with the data, where you want to see and play with the data. The outbound, very compelling, very flexible, very easy analytics component.
Great, thank you, Sean. Of course, we're always going to have some of these. What's the cost? What is some ballpark pricing that you guys can give us?
Yeah, and I'll speak to the Versium side, Sean, first, but I think it sits and resides within your environment. We'll provide custom pricing or pricing to anybody who's interested, but generally just in terms of structure, our system is designed to be subscription based and tiered based upon the volume of data that we are enriching. So there's different tiers. We support everybody from very small, mid-sized companies to large enterprises, and we structure our pricing accordingly based upon the volume of data that we're delivering using these types of tools.
Yep, and then from a Lytics component, so our licensing is determined and dictated by the number of events that are being pulled into the platform. So if we're talking about page views or email opens or downloads or rows of data imported from a database, those rows of data each count as an event. We're evaluating that event, and then we're loading that into our data structure, so that way we can perform and activate that. When the events come in, grouped to the nearest million, we're an event-based license. And so as there are enrichment that are coming in addition to web data, those are all events, including the Versium enrichment as an event, as an inbound. So we're event-based, whereas the Versium is subscription-based. So I guess we're both subscription-based technologies, but we're event-based, whereas you got to know what connector you're using inside of Versium. So Versium has a couple more levers to work with, but either way, when we know more about specifics of the volumes of data, then we can give a much more accurate pricing estimate. But the amount paid versus the amount of value getting out, it really stands for itself. You're looking at a 3x to 5x, maybe a 10x return on the investment. So the value is there. I think everybody should really turn on Versium for every one of our Lytics accounts.
Great, thank you both. All right, a couple more questions here. Any tools for GDPR or privacy management? I know you touched on this a little bit, but can we go into a little bit more in depth on that piece?
Yeah, I'll cover that. I mean, we're primarily North America right now with our data, so we don't. GDPR doesn't come into play. Historically, before GDPR came present, we have a lot of data in other countries, so we will be turning that back on. But in terms of CCPA and other privacy compliant regulations that are emerging, Versium is very focused on that. We are fully CCPA compliant. We go through all of the processes that we need to go through to ensure that the data we're delivering through data enrichment is all compliant. It all adheres to the regulatory requirements, and so that integrity gets passed on to the customers that are using our solutions. So in terms of tools, we don't necessarily have tools that help with this, other than to say we ensure that anybody who doesn't want to be part of our system, we remove. So we kind of handle all that as far as the data is concerned for the customers. So we do have a lot of tools that we deploy, they're not external tools at this stage, but that is something, Michelle, maybe we should think about, is how do we turn some of these types of things on for folks. But that's how we look at it. It's a very important aspect to us. It's going to continue to evolve, and we put a lot of energy on the topic of regulation.
Yeah, and from Lytics perspective, we are GDPR and CCPA. So we do conform to those protocols, and there are ways of serving pop-ups and modals to make sure that people get included or excluded if they don't want, or if they need their data deleted. That is held inside of Lytics, and so we can delete all that. That's a whole nother hour and a half long presentation about GDPR and CCPA compliance, but Lytics is how the data are handled, who has access to see what data, or how do you keep it hidden. There's a whole long presentation on that one, but we'll save that for another day. And yeah, Lytics does handle that on the front end there. So looks like we're at the top of the hour. We're probably out of time for questions.
Yeah, great. Thank you guys so much. That was perfect timing.
Yeah, great questions, and really been a pleasure to spend we hit it right on the nose. Perfect webinar.
Sure did.
Yeah, great job, everybody. Thank you, everyone who's attended. Don't forget we have some offers out, and we will be following up via email. Any additional questions, contact info is right there in front of you. Thanks for attending.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.